We'll begin reading in Mark chapter 5 and verse 21. Now Jesus had crossed over again by boat, so he goes back to the other side, to the western shore. Jesus crossed over again by boat to the other side, and a great multitude gathered to him. He was by the sea, and behold, one of the rulers of the synagogue came, Jairus by name. And when he saw him, he fell at his feet and begged him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter lies at the point of death. Come, lay your hands on her, that she may be healed, and she will live." So we're about to look at two miracles that are sort of intertwined together in the gospel accounts. One is the healing of Jairus' daughter, actually raising her from the dead by the time Jesus gets there. And the other is Jesus healing a woman who had an issue of blood. Both of these miracles, along with the previous miracle, would have involved, in Jewish culture, according to Old Testament law, would have involved the participants in becoming unclean. If you're a demon, obviously, if you have a demon, you would have been unclean. If you touch a dead body, you are unclean. If you have issue of blood, you are unclean. So there's a commonality in the miracles that Jesus is performing here, in that to the Jewish mind, these were not just bad events as far as we think about them, but from a spiritual standpoint, they make the person who's involved in these events unclean, or people even who are associated with some of these events might be considered to be unclean. And so that means you're cut off from temple worship. There are a number of privileges, spiritual privileges you can't involve yourself in. So to the Jewish mind, there's more to this than what we think about. When we think about these terrible events, there's even more that they would be thinking about regarding how bad these events would be. Jesus, in returning to the western shore, meets here with Jairus, or Jairus comes to meet him, and Jesus goes with him. He says, I'll come. He went with him, and a great multitude, it says in verse 24, thronged him. But then, in the midst of Jesus going to help Jairus with his daughter, it says in verse 25, a certain woman had a flow of blood for 12 years and had suffered many things from many physicians. She'd spent all that she had, and she was no better, but rather grew worse. There may be some listening to this lesson who have chronic illnesses. You've perhaps been to many doctors and you haven't gotten any better. Maybe you've spent a small fortune in treatments and tests and medications, and still you've gotten no better. It's extraordinarily frustrating. It's debilitating not only physically but emotionally as well. You get to a point where you're at your wits' end about these kinds of illnesses. And I know several. There are some here in the congregation at Eastside that suffer from these kinds of illnesses. It's tragic, and we all are saddened to see people having to go through this kind of thing. When this woman, saw Jesus coming through, when she heard about Jesus, she comes behind him in the crowd and touches his garment. Remember, she is unclean. You could go back to the book of Leviticus in chapter 15, verses 25 through 26, that talks about a woman during her customary flow of blood, impurity, would be unclean. But this woman's problem is constant, so she is constantly unclean for 12 years, really being cut off from many spiritual activities. She's suffered so much, and she spent a lot of time and effort seeking healing, as we've said. But when she touches Jesus, she's healed. It says in verse 28, she said, "If only I may touch his clothes, I shall be made well." Self-talk is a good thing if we talk to ourselves in faith and encouragement. A lot of times we talk to ourselves in negative ways, and I suppose all of us do this, where we're talking down on ourselves, or complaining about something that's happened, or we get negative in our minds. And this woman would have had every reason to think about things that way. But here in Jesus, she sees a hope. And so she turns from what may have been a very negative mindset to a very positive one. She has hope in Christ. She has faith in him. She truly believes that she could be healed if she just touches his garment. In fact, not only that she could be, but that she would be. She has tremendous faith in him. And it says in verse 29, then, that immediately the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of the affliction. Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that power had gone out of him, turned around in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" But his disciples said to him, "You see the multitude thronging you, and you say, 'Who touched me?'" He looked around to see her who had done this thing. But the woman, fearing, trembling, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. So there's no need hiding anything from Jesus. The man who could heal a person just by having his garment touched surely would know that that happened and surely would know who did it. I don't think Jesus is asking who did this as if he didn't know. He's asking, I believe, to have the woman come forth and confess her faith. Jesus could heal surely anybody he wanted to. He got the power of God. His power is beyond our imagination even. He can know what's going on in this woman's heart. But he didn't necessarily heal just for the sake of healing. Most all of the time he's trying to teach about who he is or teach lessons of faith, and he does both of those things here. He wants the woman to confess her faith, but he also wants people around to understand why they should believe in him in this same way. So he concludes the conversation with her. After she tells him the whole truth, he says to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction." What a wonderful story. And the woman, no doubt, is praising God and so thankful for the power of Jesus. But then in